Alrighty, y'all. We'll get on to some math. Got all that other, well, I guess you did some, but I got the beginning of class stuff out of the way. Let's get on to the main event here. If you would, please, at this time, make sure you're in an area that where you will not be distracted by anything else in your house, like other things, anything else that might compete for your attention, like your phone, your TV, anything like that. Please have your binder closed, no pencil in your hand, just like if we were on the meeting area in the room. I would ask you to do whatever you have to do to have your full attention here, so that as much as what I teach you stays in that memory as possible. So get yourself in a good environment, empty hands, empty everything, focused for the next 5 or 10 minutes while I try to teach you some vocabulary and some conventions. Conventions are just like the things that are normal in a field, so in a math field, around some negative numbers here today. All right, again, empty hands, just listening at this point. There will be some time to write, but I don't need you to do any writing now. So you've already learned a lot of the words I want to reinforce or extend today. We've been talking about the words positive, negative, opposite, and integer. And I'm going to introduce you to a new word you often see dealing with negative numbers now, and that is rational number. So chances are you have not heard that word before like you had in your integer. What I want you to do, take a moment. What do you predict that word means? Look closely at it for a clue. Rational number. There's a clue hiding in the word as to what it means. So that's the main thing I want to talk to you about today. I'm going to teach you what that word rational number means. I'm going to teach you some other vocabulary that goes with it and some conventions around those types of numbers, some things we do to make those numbers clear. Alrighty. So to remind you of where we are, we've mostly been talking about integers, which are positive and negative whole numbers. We have done most of the things on this row. This could be a good time to start looking for some evidence and seeing how these are going. I don't think we've done everything, but as you start to look through your binder, you're going to see a lot of evidence of these. And we're getting ready to kind of move to this second row, comparing and ordering rational numbers. And much like we didn't know what integers were when we started on the integer row, we probably don't know what rational numbers are yet either. And so we need to get there. So these are some vocabulary words. I'm going to hope we're here okay with these first four. Positive means greater than 0. Negative means less than 0. Opposite means the same distance from 0 in opposite directions. So for instance, we would say 6 and negative 6 are opposites because one is 6 to the right of 0 on the number line and the other is 6 to the left of 0 on the number line. Same distance from 0, opposite directions. Integers are positive or negative whole numbers, and this brings us to a new word today. Rational numbers are positive or negative fractions or numbers that could be fractions. Again, no need to write this, just listen and think with me right now. So integers are positive or negative whole numbers. Rational numbers are positive or negative fractions or numbers that could be fractions even if they're not already. Let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to do some I-dos. Again, no writing yet, just thinking, listening, and trying to understand. So let's start with this. How do you write negative 2/3? I want to start with that. Much like I told you the other day when we do negative whole numbers, like I like to do like the negative sign up high, or sometimes you see it like this. When we start talking about negative fractions, there's also some conventions around how we write those. There's 3 ways you might see a negative fraction written, and I want you to know that they're all the same, just like I wanted you to know that like that and that are the same. It can be a little confusing. So one way you see it is with the negative sign like outside the whole fraction. So one way you might write negative 2/3 is like that. Negative sign, then 2/3. Another way you might see it, which I think is more confusing, is sometimes you see the negative sign with the numerator. And you might see this. This is negative 2/3, and this is also negative 2/3. So I don't want you to think these are any different, much like these look really different, but they both just mean negative 6. These look pretty different, but they both mean negative 2/3. It's not different if it's not like the negative here is just with the 2. It's complicated, but I just want you to know they're the same. So this is negative 2/3, this is negative 2/3. And much like this, oftentimes you'll see people write negative fractions like that too. They'll put the fraction in the parentheses and they'll put the negative sign outside of it. Which I guess is a little different than that. They usually see it outside. I rarely see this, though I suppose that's another possible way you could do it. So one thing I want you to do is just kind of pause here and notice these are all the same. All of these mean negative 2/3 or the opposite of positive 2/3, however you want to think about that, even though they all look really different. There are 4 different ways of writing the same thing, which can be pretty confusing. So negative 2/3, is it an integer? Well, integers are positive or negative whole numbers. Negative 2/3 is not a whole number, so no, negative 2/3 is not an integer. Is it a rational number? So let's go back to that definition. A rational number is a positive or negative fraction or a number that could be a fraction. Looking here, negative 2/3 is a negative fraction. So yes, it's a rational number. It's already a fraction. We don't even have to do any complicated thinking to figure that out. Yes, it's a fraction, and fractions are irrational numbers. What is its opposite? The opposite of negative 2/3, of course, is positive 2/3. It's the same distance from 0 in the opposite direction. Let me do another one. What about the number negative 44? How do you write that? So we learned the other day, negative 44 could be written like this, or sometimes the negative sign is with it in parentheses. Either one of those means negative 44. There we go. Is that number an integer? Yes, it is. Integers are positive or negative whole numbers. That is a whole number. So yes, it's an integer. Is it a rational number? Well, let's go back to that definition. A rational number is a positive or negative fraction, which that is not, negative 44, or numbers that could be fractions. So the question becomes, negative 44, it's not a fraction now, but could it be? And the answer is yes, it could be. We do have a way of making whole numbers into fractions. They have a denominator of 1. We don't usually write it unless we need it. But technically, negative 44 is a fraction. It's negative 44 wholes. So it is an integer, yes. And it's a rational number, also yes, because it could be a fraction. And of course, what's its opposite? The opposite of negative 44 is positive 44. You can write that. It's fine to write the positive sign, not necessary to write the positive sign. One more. How do you write negative 8 and 3/10? Let's talk through that one the same way. Negative 8 and 3/10. You might write it like that. Or again, sometimes we see that in parentheses. You might write it like that. Those are both the same, and I just don't want that to be confusing to you. Is it an integer? Negative 8 and 3/10 is an integer. It is not. It's not a whole number. Integers are positive or negative whole numbers. That's not a whole number. So no. Is it a rational number? Rational numbers are numbers that are fractions, positive or negative, or could be fractions. Obviously, that's not a fraction now. Could it be? Yes, it could be. Here's the deal. We have to do a little bit of work to get there. The answer to the question is just yes, but to prove it to you, negative 8 and 3/10, we know how to turn that into a mixed number, and that's the same as negative 8 and 3/10. That's enough to prove that you can write as a fraction, but if you really want it to just be a fraction, that 8 would be 80/10, and another 3, that would be negative 83/10. So this could be a fraction. So yes, it's a rational number as well. And what is its opposite? Its opposite is 8 and 3/10. Let's try a few together. Open up your binder and find today's pages. You've got some vocabulary words to do here. The first 4 we've done lots of days. So I'm going to have you just pause the video and write those down. I am going to tell you the definition of rational number that I want you to write down because that one's new, however. A rational number is a positive or negative fraction or number that could be a fraction, even if it's not already. Okay, pause here, get these 5 definitions written down in your notes, and when you are ready, unpause, and we'll do a couple we do's together real quick. All right, few examples. Hopefully after the ones you saw me do, these will go quickly for you. Think them through. Don't just write. I want you also thinking, but do that as well. So first of all, -3/8. When it comes to negative fractions, there's lots of ways you see them written, and I don't want any to be scary. So one way you will see -3/8 written is just like this, a negative sign, and then the fraction. Perfectly normal. That's probably what you would expect. Sometimes you see the negative sign with the numerator rather than with the whole fraction. Those are the same. Those both mean -3/8. If you see them, don't be worried. Sometimes you see the whole business in parentheses. And sometimes you even see it with the negative sign outside the parentheses. All these are the same, and I just don't want you to be worried if you see any of them. Those are 4 different ways to write that negative fraction. Is it an integer? No, it's not a whole number, so not an integer. Is it a rational number? Yes, it's a fraction, and fractions are rational numbers. And what is its opposite? Its opposite is +3/8, however you want to write that. You don't have to write the positive sign, or you could. So that one's pretty straightforward with the rational number part. The big thing to know about these is this. This is what's new today. There's lots of ways you might see a negative fraction written, and I just don't want you to be scared of any. How about -75? As we've discussed in the past, 2 ways you might see -75. You might just see it like this. I like to put my negative sign up a little high. Or you might see it like this. Either way, same thing, nothing to worry about. Is it an integer? Yes, it is. It is a negative whole number, so it's an integer. Is it a rational number? Is it a fraction? No. Could it be? Yes, it could be. The number -75 we might write as -75 wholes, or -75 wholes, however you write your fraction. We can write that as a fraction. Oh, not out of 100, sorry. So it is a rational number. And what is its opposite? Its opposite is 75. Okay. One more, let's do a decimal one as well to make sure you've really got this down pat. How do you write -2 7/100ths? You could write it as a fraction or you could write it as a decimal. In my mind, I'm imagining the decimal one. We're going to just do a little work with it from there. You could write it like that, or you could write it like that. I guess technically 2, you could probably write it like that. Just don't let the parentheses fool you. Is it an integer? No, not a whole number. Is it a rational number? It's not a fraction, but it could be. So yes, it is a rational number. We could turn that into -2 7/10. And then 2 could be 20/10. So we could turn it into -27/10. So it could be a fraction, so it's a rational number. And what's its opposite? Its opposite is 2 7/10. Okay. So I hope that makes good sense to you. The big things to take away today especially are, how do you write negative fractions? There's lots of ways. And what's a rational number? Fraction or could be. What is left for you to do today is some practice with that skill. Make sure your vocabulary words are written down in your pages. 3 notes are taken. You're welcome to go back in the video if you didn't get those written down. And then, of course, you've got 10 check your understanding questions and answers on the next page. Okay? I hope this all makes sense to you. Tomorrow we'll move on to something bigger and better. So please make sure you know this. If you need to watch this video again because you lost your attention or you didn't understand or anything like that, you can. You can replay me today. After that, have a great rest of your day. See you tomorrow.